The radar screens lit up just after midnight. At first, only a few signals appeared, small blips moving slowly across the darkness. Then dozens more followed. Operators leaned closer to their consoles as alarms began echoing through the command room. Drones, long-range drones, hundreds of kilometers away, deep inside Iranian territory, launch crews had already completed their work. Engines ignited, guidance systems locked onto coordinates. One by one, the aircraft lifted into the night sky. Their destination, Israel. Within minutes, Israeli air defense networks were fully awake. Radar arrays scanned the horizon. Interceptor crews rushed to their stations. Fighter pilots ran toward aircraft already warming on the runway. Across the region, satellites, warships, and intelligence centers all focused on the same unfolding picture. For decades, tension between Israel and Iran had simmered through proxy wars, covert operations, and shadow battles fought far from public view. But tonight felt different. For the first time, the possibility of a direct confrontation between two of the Middle East's most powerful militaries suddenly looked real. And if that confrontation ever became a full-scale war, one question would dominate everything. Between Israel and Iran, who actually holds the military edge? The strikes that triggered this confrontation did not begin in the sky. They began on the ground. In the early hours of the weekend, coordinated American and Israeli operations targeted several Iranian facilities, including sites near the capital, Tehran. Precision weapons struck infrastructure linked to Iran's military and strategic programs, sending shockwaves through the region. Within hours, the response began. Iranian commanders ordered waves of drones and missiles toward Israeli territory and American-linked assets across the Gulf. Air defense systems across multiple countries suddenly activated as the projectiles moved across regional airspace. The message from Tehran was unmistakable. Iran would not absorb the strike quietly. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the operation as necessary to remove what he called an existential threat. At the same time, Washington confirmed that major combat operations were underway. The rhetoric on both sides hardened rapidly. Iranian officials warned they would not hesitate to retaliate further. Military commanders spoke openly about escalation if additional attacks followed. For years, Israel and Iran had fought indirectly, through cyber operations, intelligence missions, and proxy forces operating across Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. But now the confrontation was moving into the open. Two states, two powerful militaries, and two completely different ways of fighting wars. Because beneath the headlines and missile launches lies a deeper question, one that military analysts have debated for years. If these two countries ever fought each other, directly, which one would actually have the advantage? To understand how a war between Israel and Iran might unfold, you first have to understand something fundamental. These two countries did not build their militaries the same way. Not even close. They were shaped by completely different geography, different political realities, and very different strategic problems. Iran is a vast country, stretching across more than 1.6 million square kilometers. It is one of the largest states in the Middle East. Its cities, military bases, and missile sites are spread across mountains, deserts, and enormous distances. That size creates something military planners call strategic depth. If Iran is attacked, its forces can disperse. Airfields, launch sites, and command centers can be moved or hidden across a massive territory, making them far harder to destroy quickly. Israel faces the exact opposite reality. The entire country covers less than 22,000 square kilometers, a fraction of Iran's size. In some places, the distance from border to coast is barely wide enough to drive across in an hour. That means almost every major Israeli city, airbase, and military installation lies within reach of enemy missiles. For Israel, survival has always depended on reacting faster, striking first, and intercepting threats before they land. Iran, by contrast, built its strategy around endurance, large numbers of missiles, large numbers of launchers, and the ability to sustain pressure over long periods of time. In simple terms, Israel built a military designed for speed and precision. Iran built one designed for scale and persistence. And when analysts compare the two, the contrast becomes even clearer. One country relies on advanced aircraft, cutting-edge technology, and rapid mobilization. The other relies on sheer manpower, missile power, and geographic depth, which raises the next question. When it comes to the most basic ingredient of war, who actually has the larger military? Every war ultimately comes down to people. Soldiers to operate the equipment, crews to launch the missiles, pilots to fly the aircraft, technicians to keep everything running. And in this category, the difference between Israel and Iran is enormous. Iran has a population of roughly 88 million people, one of the largest in the Middle East. Israel, by comparison, has about 9.4 million citizens. That population gap immediately translates into a much larger manpower pool for Iran's armed forces. Today, Iran maintains around 610,000 active-duty troops across its military branches. On top of that, the country fields an additional 220,000 paramilitary personnel, including forces associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and other security units. In raw numbers, Iran's military presence is massive. Israel's active duty force is much smaller, roughly 169,500 soldiers, but those numbers only tell part of the story. Because Israel built its military around a very different concept: rapid national mobilization. Military service in Israel is compulsory for most citizens. Men and women are required to serve, creating a population that already has basic military training. After active service ends, many remain part of the reserve system for years, and that reserve force is enormous. Israel can call upon roughly 465,000 trained reservists if a large-scale conflict breaks out. In practical terms, this means the Israeli military can expand dramatically in a matter of days. Civilian life can shift to wartime footing almost overnight. Reservists report to bases, equipment is issued, and entire units can be activated within hours. It is a system designed specifically for sudden war, a necessity for a country that has faced repeated conflicts since its founding. Iran, on the other hand, relies more heavily on its standing forces and paramilitary organizations spread across the country. So while Iran clearly holds the advantage in sheer population and manpower, Israel built a military structure designed to mobilize extremely quickly. And that difference raises another crucial factor. Because manpower alone does not decide wars, geography often does. If manpower is the raw fuel of war, geography is the battlefield it must survive on. And here, the contrast between Israel and Iran becomes even more dramatic. Iran is enormous. The country stretches across more than 1.6 million square kilometers, making it one of the largest nations in the entire Middle East. Vast mountain ranges run across its northern and western regions. Huge deserts dominate the center of the country. Cities, military bases, and infrastructure are scattered across immense distances. For military planners, this size provides something incredibly valuable: strategic depth. In practical terms, it means that if Iran were attacked, its military assets would not be concentrated in a small area. Air bases, missile launch sites, storage facilities, and command centers can be spread out across hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. An enemy attempting to destroy these targets would have to conduct an enormous number of strikes over a very large territory. Even if some facilities were hit, others could continue operating. Missile launchers can move, air defenses can be relocated, command centers can be hidden underground or moved deeper into the interior. In short, Iran's geography allows it to absorb damage and continue fighting. Israel faces the opposite situation. The entire country covers less than 22,000 square kilometers, roughly 70 times smaller than Iran. At its narrowest point, Israel is only about 15 kilometers wide. Major cities, military airfields, and infrastructure are all packed into a very small area. For decades, Israeli military planners have understood the implications of this geography. There is almost no room for retreat, no vast interior where forces can regroup far from the front lines. In many scenarios, missiles launched from neighboring regions could reach their targets in only a few minutes. This geographic vulnerability forced Israel to develop a very specific way of fighting wars. Instead of relying on depth, Israel relies on speed. Instead of absorbing attacks, it tries to intercept them. And instead of allowing threats to build on its borders, it has historically preferred to strike first when it believes a danger is becoming imminent. This strategic mindset has shaped nearly every part of Israel's military structure, from its intelligence networks to its air force and missile defense systems. Iran, by contrast, can afford to think differently. Its size allows it to stretch out a conflict, disperse its forces, and make any invasion or sustained air campaign extremely difficult. Which means that while Israel depends on quick, decisive action, Iran's geography allows it to survive a longer war. But geography alone does not determine military power. Because once conflict moves into the sky, a very different balance begins to emerge. If a war between Israel and Iran ever expanded beyond missiles and into sustained military operations, one battlefield would immediately become decisive: the sky. Air power has defined modern warfare for decades. The side that controls the air can strike supply lines, destroy military infrastructure, and cripple an opponent's ability to coordinate its forces. And in this category, Israel holds one of the most advanced air forces in the world. The Israeli Air Force operates nearly 600 aircraft, including roughly 239 fighter jets capable of offensive combat missions. But the real advantage is not just the number of planes, it is their technology. Israel fields American-built F-15 and F-16 fighter aircraft, both of which have been heavily upgraded with advanced radar, electronic warfare systems, and precision-guided weapons. These aircraft have decades of combat experience and remain extremely capable platforms for long-range strike missions. Even more significant is Israel's fleet of F-35 Adder stealth fighters. These aircraft represent one of the most advanced combat systems ever developed. Their stealth design allows them to penetrate heavily defended airspace with a much lower chance of detection. Their sensors can collect enormous amounts of battlefield information, feeding real-time data back to other aircraft and command centers. In modern warfare, information is often as important as firepower. The F-35 was built specifically to dominate both. Israel also operates AH-64 Apache attack helicopters capable of supporting ground forces or striking armored targets, along with aerial refueling aircraft that allow Israeli fighters to extend their range dramatically. That range matters because Iran lies hundreds of kilometers away. Any sustained Israeli strike campaign would require aircraft capable of traveling long distances, refueling in the air, and returning safely while carrying heavy weapons. Over the years, Israel has invested heavily in exactly that capability: precision airstrikes, rapid intelligence sharing, and the ability to project air power far beyond its borders. This combination has allowed Israel to conduct operations across the region for decades, targeting weapons shipments, military facilities, and strategic infrastructure when it believed threats were emerging. But the comparison becomes more complicated when we look at Iran's air force. Because while Iran does possess hundreds of aircraft, many of them tell a very different story. On paper, Iran's air force looks significant. The country operates more than 500 military aircraft, including nearly 200 fighter jets. At first glance, those numbers suggest a force comparable in size to Israel's. But numbers alone do not tell the full story. The real challenge for Iran is the age of many of these aircraft. A large portion of Iran's fighter fleet dates back to the 1970s and 1980s, when the country still had close military ties with the United States and purchased American-made aircraft such as the F-4 Phantom, F-5 Tiger, and the famous F-14 Tomcat. Those aircraft were once among the most advanced fighters in the world, but today they are relics of a different era. The United States Navy retired its own F-14 Tomcats years ago. Iran remains the only country still operating them, keeping some airframes flying through reverse-engineered parts and complex supply networks. Iran's fleet also includes Soviet-designed aircraft like the MiG-29 and Su-24, which were acquired in smaller numbers after the Cold War. However, decades of international sanctions have made modernization extremely difficult. Spare parts are scarce, upgrades are limited, maintenance has become increasingly challenging. As a result, analysts often describe Iran's conventional air fleet as a mixture of aging aircraft from multiple eras, capable of defending national airspace, but far less effective in a high-tech air war against modern stealth fighters. Iranian military planners understand this reality. For years, they have assumed that in a direct confrontation with a technologically advanced opponent, winning a traditional air war would be extremely difficult. So instead of trying to match Israel aircraft for aircraft, Iran invested heavily in something else: ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and large fleets of drones. These systems require far fewer pilots, can be launched from mobile platforms across the country, and are far harder for an enemy to eliminate in a single strike. In other words, Iran shifted its strategy away from competing for air superiority and towards something far more dangerous: the ability to launch massive waves of missiles capable of overwhelming even the most advanced defenses, which means that in a conflict between Israel and Iran, the most important battlefield may not be the sky at all. It may be the missile battlefield. If Israel built its military around air superiority, Iran built its strategy around missiles. Over the past 2 decades, Tehran has invested enormous resources into building one of the largest and most diverse missile arsenals in the Middle East. Today, analysts estimate that Iran possesses more than 3,000 ballistic missiles of various types and ranges. Some are short-range weapons designed to strike targets a few hundred kilometers away. Others are medium-range missiles capable of traveling more than 2,000 kilometers, placing not only Israel, but large parts of the Middle East and even southeastern Europe within reach. And unlike traditional air power, missiles do not require pilots. They do not need runways. They can be launched from mobile vehicles hidden across vast areas, making them extremely difficult to locate and destroy before launch. Iran's missile force includes systems like the Shahab-1 and Shahab-2, early liquid-fueled missiles with ranges of several hundred kilometers. More modern systems followed. The Fateh family of solid-fuel missiles, including the Fateh 110 and Fateh 313, were designed for quicker launches and improved accuracy, capable of striking targets hundreds of kilometers away. Iran also developed medium-range systems such as the Shahab-3, Sejil, and Khorramshahr, which can carry larger warheads over distances approaching 2,000 kilometers. Some newer designs push even further. The K-bar missile, for example, is believed to carry a warhead weighing more than a ton while traveling roughly 2,000 kilometers. And in recent years, Iran has unveiled experimental hypersonic systems like the Fatah missile, which Iranian officials claim can maneuver at extremely high speeds in an attempt to evade missile defenses. But perhaps the most important element of Iran's strategy is not any single missile, it is the sheer number of them. Military planners often describe Iran's doctrine as saturation. Instead of relying on a small number of extremely precise weapons, Iran prepares to launch large waves of missiles and drones simultaneously. The idea is simple. Even the most advanced defense systems can only intercept so many incoming threats at once. If enough projectiles are launched at the same time, some will inevitably get through. And because missile launchers can be moved, hidden, or dispersed across Iran's enormous territory, eliminating them all in advance would be extraordinarily difficult. This approach reflects the reality Iran faces. Against technologically superior air forces, missiles provide a way to strike back without needing to control the sky. They allow Iran to threaten cities, military bases, and infrastructure across the region, which means that in any confrontation with Israel, the opening phase of the conflict would almost certainly involve waves of missiles crossing the sky. But missiles alone do not decide wars, because on the other side of this equation stands something Israel has spent decades building: a defensive shield designed specifically to stop them. While Iran invested heavily in missiles designed to overwhelm its enemies, Israel developed a very different approach: deterrence. For decades, Israeli military doctrine has focused on convincing potential adversaries that the cost of attacking Israel would be extremely high. Part of that deterrence comes from its conventional military strength. especially its air force and intelligence capabilities. But another layer lies deeper. Israel possesses its own strategic missile forces. Unlike Iran, Israel maintains a policy of deliberate ambiguity regarding many of its most powerful weapons. Officials rarely confirm details publicly, but analysts widely believe Israel operates the Jericho series of ballistic missiles, a family of weapons developed over several decades. The first of these systems, the Jericho one, entered service during the Cold War and was capable of delivering conventional or nuclear warheads over several hundred kilometers. It was eventually retired in the 1990s as newer systems replaced it. The next generation, Jericho 2, dramatically extended that range. This solid fuel missile is believed to be capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away, allowing Israel to reach adversaries far beyond its immediate neighborhood. But the most advanced system is thought to be Jericho 3. First, tested in the late 2000s and believed to be operational. Since the early 2010s, Jericho 3 is widely considered an intermediate-range ballistic missile capable of traveling several thousand kilometers. Such a range would allow Israel to reach targets across the Middle East and well beyond. Missiles like these serve a very specific purpose. They are not primarily battlefield weapons. They are strategic deterrents. Their existence signals that even if Israel were struck by large missile attacks, it retains the ability to respond with devastating force, and that deterrence may extend even further. Although Israel has never officially confirmed it, many international estimates suggest the country possesses around 90 nuclear warheads, making it the only nuclear-armed state widely believed to exist in the Middle East. Iran, by contrast, insists its nuclear program is purely civilian and maintains that it does not possess nuclear weapons. That difference shapes the strategic balance in profound ways. Because nuclear capability, even when undeclared, changes how countries calculate risk. It raises the potential cost of escalation dramatically, which means that in a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, both sides would be operating under the shadow of weapons far more destructive than conventional missiles. But even before any of those strategic calculations come into play, there is another system that would determine how the early hours of a conflict unfold. A defensive shield built to intercept missiles in flight, and it may be one of the most sophisticated air defense networks ever constructed. If Iran's strategy is built on launching large numbers of missiles, Israel's strategy is built on stopping them. Over the last 2 decades, Israel has constructed one of the most advanced missile defense systems in the world, a multi-layered shield designed to intercept threats at different distances and altitudes. Instead of relying on a single system, Israel created several defensive layers working together. Each one is designed to stop a different type of incoming weapon. The first and most famous layer is Iron Dome. Iron Dome was designed to intercept short-range rockets and artillery shells, the kind often fired from nearby conflict zones. Radar systems detect incoming projectiles seconds after launch, calculate their trajectory, and determine whether they threaten populated areas. If they do, interceptor missiles are launched to destroy them in mid-air. Since its deployment, Iron Dome has intercepted thousands of rockets, dramatically reducing the damage that short-range attacks can cause. But short-range rockets are only part of the threat Israel faces. For longer-range missiles, Israel developed David's Sling. This system is designed to intercept medium-range ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, weapons that travel farther and often move much faster than the rocket's Iron Dome was built to defeat. David's Sling fills the gap between short-range defenses and the highest layer of Israel's shield. That highest layer is the Arrow system. Arrow is designed to intercept long-range ballistic missiles, including those that travel high into the atmosphere before descending toward their targets. Some versions of the Arrow interceptor are capable of destroying incoming missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere, long before they reach Israeli airspace. Together, these 3 systems form a layered defense network: short-range threats, medium-range missiles, long-range ballistic weapons. Each layer engages targets at different stages of flight. The goal is simple. If one layer misses, another still has a chance to stop the missile before it reaches its target. But even the most advanced defensive systems face limits. Because Iran's strategy is built on something difficult to counter: volume, large numbers of missiles launched at the same time, mobile launchers spread across enormous distances, and the constant possibility that some weapons will slip through even the strongest defenses, which means that in a real conflict, the early hours would likely become a race between two opposing strategies: Iran launching waves of missiles, Israel trying to intercept them before they land. And that brings us to the final question. When all of these factors are considered, manpower, geography, air power, missiles, and defenses, who would actually have the advantage? So after comparing manpower, geography, air power, missile forces, and defensive systems, a single question remains. If Israel and Iran ever fought a direct war, who would actually win? The honest answer is complicated, because both countries hold very different advantages. Iran possesses scale. Its population is far larger, its territory is vast, and its missile arsenal is one of the biggest in the world. Thousands of ballistic missiles, combined with drones and mobile launch platforms, allow Iran to threaten targets across an enormous region. In a prolonged conflict, those advantages could matter greatly. Large territory makes military infrastructure harder to destroy quickly. Missile forces allow Iran to strike repeatedly even if its air force struggles to compete. And sustained pressure, over time, could place enormous strain on any defensive system. But Israel holds a different set of strengths: technological superiority, one of the most advanced air forces on Earth, a highly integrated intelligence network, and a layered missile defense shield designed specifically to counter large-scale rocket and missile attacks. Israel also benefits from a military doctrine focused on rapid, decisive action. Rather than absorbing attacks over long periods, Israeli strategy traditionally emphasizes speed, identifying threats quickly, striking critical targets, and disrupting enemy operations before they can escalate. In a short, high-intensity conflict, those capabilities could provide a powerful advantage. Air superiority could allow Israeli forces to strike command centers, launch sites, and military infrastructure with precision. But wars rarely unfold exactly as planners expect. Missile defenses can be overwhelmed, air bases can be targeted. Escalation can spread beyond borders, which means the real answer may depend on something far less predictable than technology or manpower: time. If a conflict remained short and highly focused, Israel's technological edge and air power could prove decisive. But if the confrontation expanded into a longer regional war, with sustained missile exchanges in multiple fronts, Iran's strategy of scale and endurance would become far more dangerous. And that is precisely why a direct war between these two countries has been avoided for so long, because both sides understand the same reality. A conflict between Israel and Iran would not look like the wars of the past. It would unfold across skies filled with drones, missiles, and interceptors, across distances measured in thousands of kilometers, and across a region where the consequences would extend far beyond the two nations involved. Which is why, even today, much of this confrontation continues to unfold. In the shadows, covert operations, proxy conflicts, strategic deterrence, a quiet struggle between two powerful states, each preparing for a war they hope never fully arrives.